Imagine a drug marketed as perfectly 100% safe for everyone, even pregnant women. Now imagine that same drug causing one of the biggest medical disasters in modern history. Well, you don't have to imagine. That is the story of thalidomide.
So, to really get this, you have to picture the world after World War II. Across Europe, anxiety, stress, insomnia, it was just everywhere. The main drugs people used were called barbiturates, but they were super risky. They were addictive, and it was frighteningly easy to overdose. The market, the world, was practically begging for something gentle, something effective, and above all, something safe.
And then, right on cue, a pharmaceutical company in West Germany steps up, and they have what looks like the perfect solution, a true miracle drug for a world that desperately needed one. And that drug was called thalidomide. On paper, it was perfect. It calmed you down. It helped you sleep. And here was the kicker. It was almost impossible to overdose on. It was hailed as this absolute dream drug, the answer to everyone's prayers.
But this miracle was built on some seriously flawed science from that era. People just took these things as fact. First, they believed the placenta was like this impenetrable fortress that protected a fetus from pretty much anything the mother took. Second, the thinking was, hey, if it's safe in a lab rat, it's going to be safe for people. The whole concept that a drug could specifically cause birth defects, what we call teratogenicity, it just wasn't really on the radar for standard drug testing.
So, fueled by this overconfidence, the marketing just went into overdrive. Thalidomide was pushed as being so incredibly safe that doctors started prescribing it off-label to pregnant women for a super common problem, morning sickness. It seemed like a no-brainer, a totally harmless fix. And that decision, well, it turned out to be absolutely catastrophic.
The drug took off like a rocket, becoming a bestseller all over the world. But as it spread, something horrifying started happening. A silent epidemic was taking hold right under everyone's noses.
I mean, just look at this chart. It shows how massive this thing got. Sold in over 40 countries. A lot of the time, you didn't even need a prescription. But see that last bar, the USA? That's a huge exception. And it's basically thanks to one person, an FDA inspector named Dr. Frances Kelsey. She just had a gut feeling that the safety data wasn't good enough, and she refused again and again to approve the drug, even under massive pressure. Her courage saved countless American families from the disaster that was unfolding everywhere else. This timeline is just chilling to look at. The drug launches in '57. By '59, you have doctors starting to notice this bizarre and shocking spike in babies being born with something called phocomelia, a super rare condition where limbs are severely malformed. But it took 2 more years, 2 full years before the connection was officially made and the drug was pulled from the market. Think of all the lives devastated in that 2-year gap.
So why? Why did it take so long to connect the dots? Well, the system was just completely broken. There was no real organized way to track side effects after a drug was already being sold. So when a doctor reported a case, it was just seen as a random tragic incident, not part of a bigger terrifying pattern. And through all, the company that made the drug just kept denying it had anything to do with their product.
But you can't bury the truth forever. And the people who finally uncovered it weren't a big government agency or the company itself. No, it was 2 incredibly persistent doctors working on their own thousands of miles apart.
The big breakthrough finally came in 1961. You've got Dr. Wittekin Lenz in Germany, and he comes forward with cold, hard statistical proof linking these specific birth defects to mothers who took thalidomide. And at the exact same time, literally on the other side of the planet, Dr. William McBride in Australia is seeing the same horrifying pattern in his patients and is sounding the alarm. It's incredible. 2 doctors, an ocean apart, they solved the same awful puzzle.
But even with this undeniable proof, the reaction was just agonizingly slow. The company kept fighting it. Governments in different countries all moved at a different pace. It was this fatal chain of delays that meant even after the world knew thalidomide was the cause, the drug was still sitting on pharmacy shelves in some places, still causing this unimaginable harm. The sheer scale of this tragedy forced a complete revolution. It changed forever how every single medicine we take today gets tested, approved, and watched over.
Yeah, this table just lays it all out. Before thalidomide, drug testing was kind of loose. Afterwards, it became incredibly rigorous, with mandatory testing specifically for birth defects. Before, the attitude was, a drug is safe for pregnancy unless you can prove it's not. After, That completely flipped. A drug is considered harmful unless you can prove it's safe. And maybe most importantly, systems to track side effects after a drug is sold became law. The whole modern system of drug safety we take for granted was built from the ashes of this disaster.
And it's so important to understand this wasn't a case of evil people trying to hurt anyone. It was a disaster that happened because of a perfect storm of scientific arrogance, corporate denial, and a complete and total failure of government regulation. It's a terrifying lesson in how good intentions can lead to absolute catastrophe when the system itself is broken.
Now, in a really strange twist, thalidomide is actually still used today. It turns out to be a very effective treatment for some types of cancer and for complications of leprosy. But, and this is a huge but, it's prescribed under the most strict controls you can possibly imagine. We're talking patient registries, constant monitoring, absolute pregnancy prevention plans. The safety measures that are in place today are a direct legacy of its own tragic past.
And that really leaves us with this one final kind of haunting question. The thalidomide disaster happened because an entire generation of smart doctors and scientists were absolutely certain about things that turned out to be dead wrong. So it forces us to ask ourselves, what are the comfortable, safe assumptions that we all rely on today that a future generation might look back on in absolute horror?